It's not the best time to be a Russian sausage tycoon, a Russian military general, the editor of a Russian tabloid, the head of a Russian ski resort, a Russian rail magnate, a Russian shipyard magnate, or Russian oil and gas executives. On Christmas Eve, Pavel Antov reportedly fell from the third-floor window of his hotel in India. He had just celebrated his 65th birthday. Besides his success in the meat processing industry, Antov was a member of a regional Russian parliament. He appeared to criticize a Russian missile attack in a residential district in Kyiv. A message from his WhatsApp account read, "It's extremely difficult to call all this anything but terror." He later claimed that the message was someone else's, not his, and reaffirmed his support of Putin. So many Russian business executives have mysteriously died that there's an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to them. The number of dead reached 25 by the end of 2022. Oil executive Alexander Sabotin was allegedly poisoned with toad venom in the home of a shaman. To better understand what's going on, I spoke with an authority figure on Russia. So I wanted to ask you if you believe that the Kremlin is behind them all, or if the answer is more complicated.
It's, surprisingly enough, more complicated. To be honest, look, the Kremlin on the whole does not need to kill people. The Kremlin has so many other ways that it can threaten and intimidate, and if need be, imprison.
Mark Galeotti is a professor at University College London who recently released his book, Putin's Wars.
I think instead what we're seeing is, in part, genuine cases of accidents and suicides, particularly for people who have suddenly lost their lifestyles, their business empires and so forth, but also a resurgence of something that we saw in the 1990s, which is in some ways murder as a business tactic.
Russia was in political and economic turmoil following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Violence as a way of doing business was the norm.
What we did see is a lot of clashes, rivalries over suddenly available markets and so forth. And at that time, absolutely, we saw a whole spate of killings.
Vladimir Putin was credited as a leader who restored stability in the 2000s and 2010s. However, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the crush of Western sanctions, Galeotti believes the cutthroat way of doing business is back.
All of a sudden, shall we say, the cake is shrinking at quite a dramatic pace. And therefore, this is what's happening. We're seeing a resurgence of a lot of the bad old ways, in which actually all of a sudden people are competing that much more fiercely for control of companies, control of resources, controls of markets.
I don't think this is a kind of sinister plot by the Kremlin.
Another Russian expert I spoke with came to the same conclusion. Peter Rutland is a professor of government at Wesleyan University in Connecticut.
The sanctions that the West imposed on Russia, the freezing of bank accounts, the seizure of some foreign assets, over 1,000 individuals have been put on sanctions lists by Western governments. So that's made the lives of Russian business people very difficult, very stressful.
In a country with the third highest suicide mortality rate in the world, he says it's highly probable that some of the tycoons took their own lives. To be clear, the Kremlin does kill when it wants to. In 2006, Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian intelligence agent who defected, was poisoned with a cup of tea containing the radioactive compound polonium at a hotel in London. Russia is the only country that produces polonium.
The conclusion that the Russian state was probably involved in the murder of Mr. Litvinenko is deeply disturbing.
Litvinenko's story has now been dramatized in a mini-series.
The man who says I must die, I know this person.
You have a name?
His name is Vladimir Putin.
There's been a long history of poisonings linked to the Kremlin. Jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny was nearly killed by a nerve agent in 2020. Investigative journalist Anna Politkovskaya, a vocal Putin critic, was poisoned on a flight but survived. 2 years later, she was shot and killed in her apartment elevator on Putin's birthday. However, these political targets are unlike the recent deaths involving corporate executives.
Business people, frankly, if they want to get rid of them, they can just arrest them. It's a lot easier.
So, as easy as it may seem to point the finger at the Kremlin, the bigger picture is more complicated. Nonetheless, the deaths are very suspicious. Some even involve entire families. Sergei Protasenia, the former deputy head of Russia's second-largest gas company, was accused of killing his wife and daughter at their Spanish villa with an axe before hanging himself. However, his former employer, Novatech, said speculations about his death bear no relation to reality. This was backed up by Sergei's son, who was not in Spain at the time. He told the UK's Daily Mail, "He loved my mother and especially Maria, my sister. She was his princess. He could never do anything to harm them. I don't know what happened that night, but I know that my dad did not hurt them." If the death toll continues in 2023, speculation over their cause will remain strong. As former Soviet Defense Minister Georgy Zhukov once said, "There are things in Russia which are not as they seem." With the war in Ukraine, independent media outlets have been shut down in Russia. Many have tried to browse foreign media for news. To help you browse quickly and securely online, I recommend Guardio. Guardio is an extension that protects your information while you're browsing. It's kind of like having an online bodyguard that sits in your browser. Guardio blocks 100 times more harmful websites and phishing attempts than its competitors. Guardio will block dangerous downloads, even if you've clicked download, to ensure no harm goes to your computer. You know those annoying pop-up ads? They may indicate that you have malware on your device. Guardio traces the sources and eliminates the invasive notifications all at once. You can install Guardio from the Chrome or Edge store, as I did. After installing, a free security scan will detect existing threats found on your computer. You can then get a free 7-day trial to remove these threats, enable real-time protection, and get real-time alerts when your information could be at risk. If you'd like to protect yourself and your family from these emerging online threats, you can start your free trial by clicking my custom link in the description, guard.io/newsthink. guard.io/newsthink. And get 20% off your monthly subscription, which is good for 5 family members at no extra cost.